I know that I said in the last video that the first one was my favorite. And you know what? It still is. That hasn't changed. But I can't deny the best one is Spider-Man 2. As much as I love the first one, as much as it still is my favorite, it's more off of childhood memories and nostalgia rather than the film's actual quality. The film's still amazing, absolutely, but I mean, when you really stop and think about it, 2 is better. Heck, 2 is arguably one of the best sequels ever made of any movie, period. So, without any further delay or ado, let's dive right in. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Animation Station, your #1 stop destination for anything and everything animation, and sometimes live action, including a certain web-slinging superhero saving New York City from crime. Spider-Man 2. Whether you're talking about the movie or the video game, this film is iconic. It is still, to this day, considered by many people as the best Spider-Man movie, and arguably one of the best comic book movies ever made, period. Even almost 20 years later, Spider-Man 2 is still held in high regard by critics, by fans, by comic book readers, and by the general audience. And while 1 is still my personal favorite, that's more out of how many times I've watched it. I can't deny that when it actually comes to things like the story structure and the writing and, well, the story itself, 2 is better than 1. And 2 is definitely way better in the effects department. Like, I wasn't shy about how crap the CGI was in the first movie. Here, it's a lot better, but you can still tell it's fake. But at the same time, it kind of feeds into its comic bookiness. So, is that a word? Yeah, I'm going to call it a word. I create half-efforted, so here's comic bookiness. Deal with it. So in this second film, Peter Parker is struggling to maintain his superhero life as well as his actual personal life. He's not getting things done on time. He gets fired from his job. He loses the girl he loves to an astronaut. Yeah, we're gonna talk about him later. And pretty much has a midlife existential crisis. And as a result, he starts losing his powers. He starts being less and less effective as Spider-Man. And he starts thinking to himself, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be Spider-Man. Maybe I'm supposed to just do what I want to do. And that's what he does. He quits being Spider-Man, and he goes back to his normal life pretty much. Before the spider bite even happened, he's back to being a nerd. He shows up to college on time. He goes to Mary Jane's play. Like, everything seems to be looking up, but then there's that little part inside him that still is questioning, is this what he really wants, or should he still be a hero, still save people at the cost of, his personal life? Meanwhile, Mary Jane is also struggling in her own way as well. Like, the characters in here are so multi-layered and built well off of the solid foundation from the first movie. Here, Mary Jane starts to resent Peter a little, but at the same time, she can't help but stop thinking about him. Like, she can't stop thinking about him, even when she's engaged to this astronaut. Like I said, we'll get to the boring astronaut later. And she's just trying to figure out, well, what's right for me? What should I do? And the biggest advantage this movie has is how down-to-earth adult and grounded it really is. Like, they don't sugarcoat his struggles or sugarcoat the fact that he is doing a lot of bad things. He's making promises he can't keep. And all through his struggle, you can understand where he's coming from. It's not like out of the blue, like it's not out of the blue, it's not completely out of character. No, it makes sense for his character. It makes the point of building his character, of him of him trying to find his true destiny. And while he's going through this crisis, there's another villain that's technically somewhat of his creation, Dr. Octavius, played by the amazing Alfred Molina. By the way, happy birthday, Alfred. I know you're probably never going to watch this video, but happy birthday, man. Happy belated birthday. And Doc Ock is another excellent villain. Like, he's relatable. You can understand where he's coming from. And while the things he does are villainous, at the same time, you feel sympathy for him. And not to mention, just like Green Goblin, while he is still over-the-top comic book and silly, he has this realistic center that really grounds him in somewhat of a reality. You know, he loses his wife. His experiment fails. Oscorp hates him because now they're going down the toilet. We'll talk about Harry in a minute. So you can understand why he thinks that this is what he needs to do. He needs to rebuild the machine. He needs to do what he started and finish it. But because of these evil arms controlling him, at the same time, like, it's like dual personalities in one head, you know, the classic Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of situation. And then you have J. Jonah Jameson, who, well, at first he's happy that Spider-Man quits, but then after a while, especially after Mary Jane gets kidnapped by Doc Ock, he starts to, you know, feel sorry for what he did and feel like he's the reason that Spider-Man quit, even though it's not how it works at all, but it still works to the benefit of the story and the development of his character. That scene in his office where he laments that he's sorry for driving Spider-Man away and accepts that now more than ever, the city needs him, whether he likes it or not. And yes, he just reverts back to the same old J. Jonah Jameson when he swings by to get his suit. But at the same time, like, if it's like him finally, well, you know, realizing what he needs to do. This is a movie pretty much all about destiny, all about realizing where you need or want to go in life. Like, yes, I know saying that about a Spider-Man movie sounds silly, but when you actually watch this movie, it makes a whole lot of sense. Peter's trying to figure out where he belongs. Mary Jane's trying to figure out where she belongs. J. Jonah Jameson actually starts to conflict with himself in his office. That one scene, through just his emotion, through just his tone of voice, like, he's not talking a million miles a minute anymore. He talks somberly, slowly, and nails that perfect tone of regret and wishing that he didn't do what he did. Like I said, yes, he reverts back to the same old J. Jonah Jameson, but that part is always going to be part of his character. Like, a deep down, you know, like, deep down, he is a caring guy who's glad Spider-Man's around, but he hides that over an exterior of hating Spider-Man, of slandering him in the news, and, well, you know, just being all uppity and angry. You know what I mean. And at the same time, you also have Doc Ock, who's, well, obeying what the arms say because he thinks that's what's the right thing to do. But by the end of the movie, with Peter's help, he realizes the arms don't control him. He controls his own destiny. And that's what makes this movie so beloved by so many people, because it's far more adult than you'd think it would be. With these real life struggles that for most people are pretty relatable. You know, maintaining a job, trying to figure out where to go in life. Like, it's a movie about trying to find your destiny and where you want to go in life. Because you only get one life. So you might as well use it to the fullest doing what you want to do. Or doing what you think is necessary to get by. It's a film that really hits on a lot of serious topics and treats them with respect. Yes, you still have campy silliness. This is still a comic book after all, but it still has such a realistic, grounded story at its center. And it does a great job developing all these characters. Even the one that's only here in this one film, Doc Ock. And we see that development carry on even more into Spider-Man No Way Home. Like, it's amazing what they were able to do with this movie. Of how to top the original in its story and its writing and its situations and the way the story is structured. It's all an improvement from the first. And you still have the campy, goofy silliness that kids love about Spider-Man. It's that perfect balance that only comes around every once in a great while. Every once in a generation or a decade. Where you find that perfect balance between realism and silliness. And not to mention comic book accuracy. Heck, you could even argue this one is more accurate to the comic books than the first movie. Because you have the Spider-Man No More storyline. They replicate that iconic shot from the comic book cover in the movie. They have Peter struggling, and they have him, well, trying to find his purpose again. It's not beat for beat like the comic. Obviously, the comic differs in a lot of ways, but it still really does the comic justice in its own unique way, to where it doesn't feel like a straight-up adaptation, but more of kind of an homage to it. And then you still have the goofy dialogue. You still have the hilarious one-liners like, pizza time. And you still have the awesome fights you would expect out of a comic book movie. Yes, I can understand why some people may have been a bit bummed out from the ending battle not really being, well, a battle. Being more about, Peter and Mary Jane. But you know what? That's kind of what this whole series has revolved around, so you can't be that mad about it. And then the fights themselves are fantastic. Whether you're talking about the fight in the bank, the fight on the train, the fight on the side of the bank, the fight on the side of the bank. Like, any fight you can think of in this movie, and they're all fantastic. And it really gets down to the core of what it means to be a hero, the sacrifices you have to make. And it hits on such a deeper note than you'd think it would. And then you still have everything you want from a comic book movie, including another Bruce Campbell cameo. I forgot to talk about this in the first movie, and I'm so sorry. But in the first movie, we had Bruce Campbell as the wrestling ring announcer, and he was hilarious. Then in the second movie, you have him as the theater guard who keeps Peter from getting in, which is also pretty funny, especially when he keeps pointing to the signs on the doors. And then, of course, in the third movie, well, we'll get there when we get there, but it's even more funny than these two roles were. Like, that's the thing. Once again, just like the first movie, even the side roles are just as important as the main roles. Aunt May, in particular, like, she gets such a great amount of focus in this movie and does a great job driving her story forward without it feeling forced or feeling like it's competing for screen time with Peter's story or with MJ's story or with Doc Ock's story. Like, it's all just perfectly balanced. It doesn't feel like one's trying to fight the other. It all feels like it flows together very naturally. And then there's Harry. Unfortunately, it doesn't really lead to a whole lot of payoff in the third movie, but they do an amazing job here showing the dark path he goes down. How he and Peter slowly drift apart, and how their friendship keeps getting more and more frail and shattered. Leading up to that reveal that we all know by now, so I'm not going to repeat it. And then, of course, the way it ends for his character in the movie. With, him discovering that his father is Green Goblin. And setting the stage for him to be in the next movie as the next villain. Until the studio threw that design out, threw that whole freaking story out the window. But, you know what? I will complain about that tomorrow when I get to 3. So I have so much love and praise for this movie for a ton of reasons, and while it's not my personal favorite, that's still the first, 2 is still a great sequel that really doubles down on the grounded reality of it, while also still being a silly comic book movie. So, what's wrong with this movie? What are the things that I don't like about it? Well, it's just one. It's just one little thing that keeps me from being able to say this movie is a flawless masterpiece. Because this is literally my only problem with the movie. The son, the astronaut side plot. This wastes time, is pointless, the character is boring, and you could literally cut all the scenes of this son, the astronaut. Like, you could cut all his scenes out of the movie and you wouldn't miss a damn thing. It literally felt like it was just jammed in there for time filler. That's the only thing that's keeping me from being able to call this movie a flawless masterpiece. That whole side plot with Mary Jane the astronaut is garbage. It is total garbage. It's forced. It doesn't flow naturally with the story, and it feels entirely friggin' pointless. Seriously, screw that whole stupid side plot. It's a stupid side plot that's stupid. Moving on. Oh, and I almost forgot to talk about the most important cameo in the movie. Thomas Jane. Yeah, Thomas Jane as the Punisher, literally in his Punisher garb from the Punisher movie. Just in the background, as Mary Jane is running by in her wedding gown to go see Peter. Like, I missed that the first few times I saw this, but now I can't unsee it. Like, he turns around like, what are you doing? You're going the wrong way. I love the Punisher movie, personally, so I just really wanted to point that out. I adore this. I adore this film. Aside from that stupid side plot with my son, the pointless astronaut, this movie's perfect. Aside from that one part, this movie is literally perfect. It does everything a good sequel should do. It builds upon the foundations of the original, tries to raise the stakes, up the tension, and pretty much take all the positives of the first film and make it even better while also adding all its own positives on top of that. The grounded realism, the incredible story, the great, mostly, writing, the excellent acting, the fantastic fights, and just all those moments all combined together to make a phenomenal comic book film. I can see why this is still heralded as the best Spider-Man movie, even though I wouldn't personally say that, but it's up there, top 2 at the very least. It is the height of the Raimi trilogy. It is Tobey Maguire's best Spider-Man film. And say what you want about 3, it did an amazing job setting it up. One plot line that gets thrown out quick, but still. Spider-Man 2 is an absolutely phenomenal sequel that does everything that it needed to do, and even more than that. It's respectful of the comic books while also being a very entertaining, extremely fun movie, while also having a nice, grounded adult edge that when you grow up and watch this movie as an adult, it hits you right in the feels, because as a kid you don't think about that kind of stuff, but when you're an adult and you watch it and you see Peter's struggle, it becomes much more relatable, and it hits you much harder than it did as a kid. And I think that's why I connected with the first film so much, because it didn't take itself too seriously. It was overly silly, and while it did have a dark, scary villain, like, outside of that, it was pretty lighthearted and goofy. This one, I now appreciate more as an adult because of that storyline, because of the balls that Sam Raimi had to continue to develop his story. Spider-Man 2 is a phenomenal sequel, but I just can't call it my favorite Spider-Man movie. The first one has that nostalgia attachment with me. So at the same time, I can't say it's better than the first. But that's out of my own nostalgia, because I've seen 1 more times than I've seen 2. But 2 is a phenomenal movie, whether you're a kid, an adult, a comic book fan, a Spider-Man fan, or just a general audience member. This is a fantastic film, plain and simple. And those of you complaining about the crap CGI, it's gone, because in this movie, the effects are way better. It is a bigger budget, more risky, just spectacular, amazing masterpiece of a film. Aside from My Son, the Astronaut, the stupid time wasting plot that didn't need to be there. The movie, outside of that, is entirely perfect. At least in my opinion. Final verdict for Spider-Man 2 is an 11 out of 10. Still one of the best comic book movies ever made, and I will not argue against it being amazing. You know what I will argue, though? Those of you that say Spider-Man 3 is garbage. Yeah, if you're expecting me to rip it apart tomorrow, prepare to be disappointed. That's all I'm going to say. Because I like Spider-Man 3. And I'm going to explain why tomorrow, along with a good friend of mine. I'm not going to say who, because I'm pretty sure you guys already know by now. I mean, it's literally in his channel title. So for those of you that know, look forward to it, and those of you that don't, prepare to be surprised. See you tomorrow for my controversial hot take on Spider-Man 3.